Hello, welcome to another session for Rail Baltica Academy. My name is Artūrs Caune and I'm representing Road Transport Administration. Today I would like to tell the story about the fascination of transport planning and scheduling. My connection with Rail Baltica is quite long. I started in 2015 by joining Rail Baltica special purpose vehicle adhere, and I was among one of the first team members. So during the years serving Rail Baltica joint venture, I was engaged in a number of studies and preparations of Rail Baltica project. I participated as well in first operational studies and other strategic studies. Then after Rail Baltica joint venture, I joined for Latvian implementing body Eiropas dzelzceļa līnijas, and my tasks were starting 2021 related to setting up, let's say, a kind of startup for infrastructure management and developing the capacity and complexity of the organization towards operational phase. Now, I joined recently, a couple of months ago, Road Transport Administration, and I'm interim CEO there, and still I maintain a considerable connection to Rail Baltica. What has common Road Transport Administration and Rail Baltica, one may ask. I will answer later in my presentation. For the ones who would like to ask the questions, please use slido.com facility. Please do it in two ways: either scan the QR code you see on the screen and join the Slido conversation, or just type slido.com and add hashtag Rail Baltica Academy, and you will be joining then the place for asking the relevant questions. I will try to answer the questions during the course of my storytelling, but as well there will be some additional time at the end of my presentation to discuss some of them further or maybe deeper. If you look back on what is Rail Baltica, and perhaps for you as audience, this is not new, as Rail Baltica Academy has presented already numerous stories about Rail Baltica, but still I would like to reintroduce on key facts. Rail Baltica is more than just a railway project. I would call it Rail Baltica is a huge game changer towards sustainable mobility and development of economic corridor among the Baltics and in connection with Finland and Poland and further of other EU countries. Rail Baltica is supposed to create a fast connection, doing it by high-speed passenger services and as well in terms of fast freight services on a mixed railway line from Tallinn to Lithuanian and Polish border and further towards Poland, Warsaw, and the rest of the railway network. We will change the game of the mobility in the future considerably, as you may recall from the proposed and planned timetables. Then It will reduce the travel time by 50%, meaning that, as example, if you travel nowadays from Riga to Tallinn and it takes 4.5 hours either by car or bus, or a similar time would take as well airport services, well, the flight itself would mean a travel around 40 minutes, but all the check-ins and security controls, of course, take a lot of time. So Rail Baltica will make the Baltic countries closer together, developing much more economic potential and looking for even more and even higher economic integration, and as well providing the, I would call it, gates to the rest of Europe in the meaning of connecting to the railway single area. Some common features. Rail Baltica is not a standalone project, but fits into the European Trans-European Transport Corridor core network corridor map, which is presented here, and forms, let's say, the logical connection in northeastern Europe. In terms of some functional and technical features, so after the completion, the infrastructure will allow trains to run for the speeds up to 250 for the passenger trains and up to 120 kilometers per hour for freight trains. As well, the infrastructure will allow to form quite long trains in order up to 1050 meters, which is not yet, let's say, common standard across European Union. We are used more to the train lengths of 750 meters, but here we are using the opportunity of having Rail Baltica as the greenfield project, and allowing to make infrastructure already fit for a very long-term perspective. Of course, in terms of the systems, we are aiming to implement latest technologies, like for the traffic management and train control systems, ETCS level 2 and FRMCS, and as well go for electrification standard 2x25 AC electrification. And as well, we will have very promising axle loads and loading gauges. Thus, together with 7 international and 3 passenger stations and 3 main multimodal freight terminals, we will make a very attractive offer for railway undertakings and freight and logistics and passenger business to serve all the connections either inside the Baltics and in Baltics in connection with the rest of European Union. As well, Rail Baltica will provide important connections to airports, seaports, and road transport. Again, I mentioned already the speeds. The speeds are actually not only the 250 kilometers per hour limit and 120 kilometers per hour limit, but as well we set 200 kilometers per hour as intended speed as well for the regional trains. Rail Baltica will be not just let's say international connectivity provider on international services, but we see as well a lot of potential of making cross-border train services in regional traffic, and for that purpose we develop as well the the regional stations, and I will tell a little bit more about the regional stations further on. On the principles we have used, and I will tell as well on the basis on this, let's say on the practical example, how we are working in Latvia of multimodal public transport network planning and scheduling, and I would say that principle number one, which is not by coincidence here presented as the Swiss clock. We are strong believers that the principles of proper timetabling and making proper service offer for our citizens and inhabitants is very important. And here as well, as the example, Riga Central Station in Latvia and Riga would be the main meeting point for the trains in Latvia, and perhaps as well across the Baltics. We expect Riga becoming the biggest hub in terms of passenger transportation in Baltics, as we will directly interconnect here the train services of existing 1520 gauge network and Rail Baltica on 1435 network, as well as having here in the proximity and as well directly in the station area as well service facilities for regional bus transport, and as well having here in the proximity in the Riga station area urban public transport. So the development will make a significant hub where, of course, synchronization of all transport modes and their timetables becomes more and more important. Second principle we have applied so far for Rail Baltica, and it was I would tell that it was the first time in the Baltics when the integrated approach was made, and this was done in Rail Baltica operational plan study back into the 2019, where first based on the demand projections, a timetable as a service offer was created, and this timetable has been utilized now for the railway infrastructure planning. Of course, there have been already several iterations, and we have set here by the operational plan study as well the first track layout of entire Rail Baltica infrastructure, and as well timetable, since the study has already experienced some changes. And only then, when the timetable and railway infrastructure is synchronized, then and there is option to go further on for let's say looking which will be the proper rolling stock, and then go to railway operation phase, compared to the traditional approach where we draw the railway infrastructure and then try to put the timetable. Of course, what we again hear is that the infrastructure is sized properly according to the demand projections, and we may save here some infrastructure, and we may as well save some under let's say how some under investment in the meaning that by proper timetabling at the early phase, of course, we can understand how the trams will be running much better and prepare the railway infrastructure designs much more precisely. This we experienced already as well on the example Riga Central Station, and for the Riga Central Station as well, several changes in the track layout, both for the 15-20 gauge infrastructure and as well as Rail Baltica were introduced based on these studies and plannings. Here as well, I'm looking on the questions, and there is a question what kind of IT solutions for train time schedule composing do you use? So at the operations study time we have used and still are using, and as well asking from the consultant if there is any consultant who does the outsourced work. We work with the RailSys software. So RailSys is the tool we believe one of the most appropriate for let's say for the exercise. It has to be done in connection of creating a timetable and planning properly the railway infrastructure. Of course, in the later stages, once it will be already in more details about the rolling stock planning and then already the rolling stock operations planning, then of course another types of software shall be used in the future. But here as well, important is to note that that this would be then the responsibility area of the railway undertakings. Here is forced to mention that Rail Baltica is an open access railway infrastructure, so it means that we take very much care about splitting the responsibilities, which is responsibility of delivering the infrastructure, which is responsibility of managing the infrastructure, and responsibility of running the trains. But of course, during the planning and design stages, we need as well understanding on how the operations will be made, which possible rolling stock could be made, and this is already then reflected by the RailSys model. Going then further for the principles, a long-term view. Long-term view has been applied so far in planning and designing Rail Baltica, so that very often the number you see here on the screen, 2056, is the time horizon for the long-term planning. And this long-term plan is considered then already in different studies and as well in the design phase. But very likely the parts of the infrastructure which are necessary for that time horizon will not be constructed or delivered right now, because there is some decades still to go. And for the first phases of operations, there might be not necessary then full set of infrastructure which is necessary for the long term. Again, here in terms of software and practicalities for Rail Baltica, then the main software which was used here was the RailSys. But for the story, I will tell later on as well, going already beyond the Rail Baltica scope, going into the harmonization of the public transport systems, meaning integration of Rail Baltica into the rest of the public transport system and improving the public transport system. Of course, there are different other tools will be used in next planning stages. I mentioned three principles. So first principle, let's say the proper timetable with synchronized timetables. Second principle of demand first, timetable second, and infrastructure only then. It is, let's say, in theory, very easy to tell and say that these are the principles to apply, but in the practicality, of course, it means as well a lot of dedicated work, a lot of competencies, and a lot of expert work. I mentioned in the beginning that the first studies, and for these studies, for reference, you may grab onto railbaltica.org website, Rail Baltica operational plan study and Riga node operation optimization study, which specifically deals with the Latvian case and synchronization of two networks, Rail Baltica and existing 1520 gauge networks. These studies have been published, and for further reading, of course, you can refer to website. However, for those who are present at this session and not for the first time, for sure, as well as my colleagues have referred to these studies. So there is a lot of reading, but I would say that this is worth to mention again and again, as these two form very much the background of further plans we are implementing in different work streams, including beyond Rail Baltica. So these next steps are further studies, as there was created by EU Recovery Resilience Fund. Then Latvia decided to go for public transport reform, and one of the studies currently ongoing is setting up a new public transport plan for Riga metropolitan area, meaning having ultimately a synchronization of railway services, regional bus, urban public transport services for Riga and metro area, and as well further area which goes on the let's say on the border with other regions, as well derived from these two studies, notably Riga node operation optimization study, Latvian state and particularly as well Road Transport Administration as holder of public transport authority are working on zero emission train delivery plans, and in particularly for battery electric multiple units for serving the network. As well, here the Riga node operation optimization study was used as a background study for let's say as an input for further details and further technical studies. How it works in the practicality, I mentioned already that it is not like just doing a study or doing by one institution a study. It is a multiple stakeholder environment, and again, looking just in case of Latvia, it would be typically to create let's say a transport plan, and then later on a timetable or the schedule for multimodal transport. It is not only the Ministry of Transport as policy authority, but as well public transport authorities, and in this case ATD or Road Transport Administration as the authority in charge for the regional public transport, including train services, and this means as well including Rail Baltica, and the cities which are in charge for the urban public transport, as well railway infrastructure managers. In this case, in Latvia, we are having here then the Latvian 1520 gauge infrastructure manager, Latvia's Dzelzceļš, and as well Rail Baltica team as responsible for the infrastructure management on Rail Baltica, and of course including the special purpose vehicles, which would be the Rail Baltica joint venture, RB Rail, and Artūrs Caune as implementing body. So there is multiple setup, similar, but in the same time as well different in other countries, in Estonia and Lithuania. And the fascination is here then the ability and ambition for cooperation and creating common understanding on how, let's say, the transport and mobility should look like in the future. Here, before going for the next slide, I would like as well then to answer to the question, what are the perspectives for private railway undertakings to operate on Rail Baltica line? As I mentioned already, there are, of course, big possibilities and big opportunities, as this is not only my strong belief, but this is the let's say the background of the project is that the infrastructure is created as an open access infrastructure. So having then the opportunity for any railway undertaking to provide any type of the services. But of course, some of the services, I mean here in particular, then the regional services might not be the ones which are which could be run on the commercial basis. There are largely in the regional transport approach that the regional transport and urban transport are the ones which are subsidized across EU. As well, in the Latvian case, I would say the current public transport system is working on the conditions when €1 of public money is spent for equally having then from the user's perspective spending at least €1, and so this means that as well for Rail Baltica case, for the regional transportation, I personally would say that there is a very big chance that the regional services will run under the PSO modalities, so public service obligation modalities, and will be subsidized from the public transport authorities. However, on how it will be very precisely, there is yet a number of the studies to be done to understand the market, to understand more precisely the demand, the costs, and the service levels, and only then the proper decisions will be made. As Road Transport Administration in capacity of public transport authority, we are starting here as well to do the necessary steps which are related to create the framework for these public transport services. So at least on national level, but as well we see a lot of potential for going on cross-border regional services, thus enabling much better regional integration across the regions in the Baltics. Some insight into the numbers. If we look on the public transport system, and this is let's say this is let's say the data on the system running under the PSO contracts. In the past years, like in 2022, we had around 1.3 billion passenger kilometers made by trains and buses altogether. You can see here in the stats quite a significant drop during the COVID phase. But what we can see already by 2023 data, then train services are recovering quite well. We see that in the most cases, the services have reached already 2019 levels or exceeding. In some lines, we have even better messages, so that in some services the numbers of passengers have increased even by +20 plus up to +30% compared to the respective months in 2019. So there are good news, but as well there are not perhaps that good news. We see that in the regional bus transport these services are not recovering that well. We still lag approximately 10% behind 2019 data. But at least in terms of the, let's say, sustainable move towards the train services, then we see in the totality that there are good prospects for the train services. And the intention, together with Rail Baltica, is as well to double the railway share in motorized mobility, but this means not on the cost of the bus transport, but on the cost of reducing the number of the car drivers. Of course, this is an ambition, and ambition is not an easy ambition, as we all understand that the car driver is a very difficult client, needs very special attention, and only, let's say, the directive approach by penalizing would not help very much. We have to develop a proper service so that the service offer fits within the understanding of the car driver's perspective, and we can sell the railway transport as much better and more sustainable and more comfortable, and of course as well more viable mode of transport than just going by a car. And as well, having a little bit some numbers on the totality of the system. ADD is single public transport authority. So as I mentioned, for regional network, so for buses and trains, and in future as well, including for Rail Baltica regional trains. We as public transport authority are not alone. There is as well a body created by law, Public Transport Board, which consists of representatives of government, so the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Finance, and as well regional representatives. So this Public Transport Board helps us to coordinate and make more easier compromises on top-down approach, so that from the national perspective towards the local, the municipal perspectives and regional perspectives, thus making much better functioned and much more inclusive public transport system, as not everything can be overseen just by one central body. We need a lot of as well local experience, local views of local situation, which helps, of course, then to create the transport offer much more targeted to the local needs. However, there are as well 9 cities in charge of urban public transport, and these cities are then funding their urban public transport systems, like it would be Riga or Liepāja or Valmiera by themselves. What does the state here is helps to improve the mobility conditions for some social groups of persons, where some discounts on the tickets are made, so that the most disadvantaged social groups can as well can have access to the mobility services in a proper level. In the totality, in Latvia, the number 70.4 and 6.2 is the number of respectively bus kilometers and train kilometers made, so the network dimensions. Number 20% is modal share according to Eurostat, which makes the public transport. It is not perhaps the best value across the EU, but altogether it is as well not the worst. However, again, in the railway transport, the green number 3.5 is the modal share currently in the railway transport, and of course there is a lot of potential to improve and to make the network much more appropriate. The question was as well, are Riga and Tallinn's tram networks and other public transport going to match their schedule with the trains, or is the service frequent enough? That's not a problem. I will answer as well later on. Partial answer is that in the most cases, urban public transport in the capital cities is frequent enough, so that there is perhaps a little effort necessary. I would say that much more important is to synchronize the regional traffic, so irrespectively of the mode of transport, be it rail or be it bus, with Rail Baltica, as here then the travel times and the schedule will be quite different. As well, some trends. What we see is that, of course, there has been a great increase of consumer prices in the past years, as well. Let's say fuel increases. However, the fuel prices are already going down or stabilizing. As well as negative, we see the number of inhabitants is decreasing, but the wealth is increasing. And one of the next plans is to respond to this cost increases as well. One of the part of the reforms which is initiated currently by public transport authorities to review the ticket prices, partly to increase them, partly to simplify them, and as well implement more zoning approach across the entire network. And this would help as well to improve, let's say, the public financing status, as public transport services during the past years have been under big financial pressure by losing the passengers due to pandemics and thus travel restrictions and so on. And now we are recovering, but of course the recovery does not help alone. As well, the prices have been increased considerably, and soon then as well we will be needed to increase the price levels for the tickets. The good news is that these increases will change the ticket ticket policy in the meaning that there will be some more, I would call them loyalty programs, so that those who travel a lot with the public transport will get much better discounts than this is nowadays in Latvia. So we will be encouraging the frequent users for using even more and going for more, let's say, kind of flat rate conditions. There might be as well the question: do we plan to implement similar principle of having then 49 euro ticket as it is in Germany? For time being, no, but I would say that the first step will be that with this ticket reform, which is starting this year and continuing over the next year, we will be able to offer for our public transport system users in Latvia then a much fairer, much better conditions for frequent travel. And now I would wanted as well then with some sketches answer and present some thoughts on how the future of integrated transport may look like. One of the questions was which software do we use for the transport planning? Of course, you can derive that as of this presentation, this is of course as well GIS tools, GIS information in different layers and means, as well the let's say public transport contract management system delivers a lot of data which helps to overview the performance of the system, the routes, the network, the finance, the passenger numbers, etc. This helps, of course, as let's say contract management software, which has as well links with GIS tools. But here as well, then for the future, as public transport authority, in this case, in charge for Latvian regional public transport, we are planning as well to improve and go for more digitalization, as the current systems are quite already quite a long time into operation, and we have to step a way forward towards digitalization, and perhaps as well using some big data, which is not done yet. But here on the sketch, let's say I wanted to zoom in into one of the regions, so northeastern region, Vidzeme in Latvia. We started just a couple of days ago, let's say, first discussions with the municipalities on route network 2.0, meaning that 10 years ago, the first network was created, and this was created then from the patchwork of around 40 standalone networks, urban and say municipal level networks. There was a creation then of one integrated network, having of course several layers. Basically, we can say that there are three segments: intercity, which connects the capital city with the big cities in Latvia, or the big cities between them. Then interurban, which would mean that let's say main regional development centers are connecting between themselves. And the third layer is of course local, which is regional for the rural areas, and urban transport for the city areas. And again, the synchronization of the timetables and creation of one synchronized strategic timetable is a very big ambition. for the tasks we have now on the agenda. And this is as well an example how in practicality we are using the studies done by Rail Baltica, notably Riga node operations optimization study, which is the main input to basically to create then a service offer around the railway network for the entire country. And then, of course, we need as well to connect the bus services. And here in the examples, we have then at least for the discussion in Vidzeme region, 3 further synchronization points, which are more or less at the 60-minute, so there is 1 hour travel time Riga to Cēsis, and at the 30 minutes or 90-minute travel time from Valmiera to Riga, and as well on Rail Baltica, Skultas stop would mean there is travel time around 45 minutes, and there would be then synchronization possibility at minute 45 for the network, meaning as well the existing synchronization with the existing railway and synchronization with all level bus transport, so that we get a really integrated network and integrated timetable. As to the service offer, if you would like to look into the service offer, how currently the trains are running on the 1520 gauge network, you would discover that there is almost Tagfahrplan, but not really, and not especially this is not really implemented in the regional traffic. If we look for the suburban network, so it means the capital city of Riga and its suburbs, and let's say closest rural territories, which would make distance 30, 50, up to 60, 70 kilometers from the city center of capital city Riga, then there is already a kind of regular interval timetable in place. It was implemented based on Riga node operations optimization study recommendations. However, due to the construction constraints in Riga Central Station, of course, not a full scale of timetable has been implemented as well. Yet to come is as well new trains for the operation, which is envisaged in the upcoming months, so that more trains and more comfortable new trains will, of course, as well enable much better services. But looking then for the regional perspective, I would say that what we look and what we discuss with the municipalities is having at least bi-hourly traffic in the connection, and in as well in long term with let's say speed increases, so that we can manage that trains are considerably faster than the bus services, so that this makes easier as well shift from bus services in longer distance services, also in the intercity services towards let's say preference for changing to trains. In peak hours, we would see that for the most let's say directions, then an hourly service would be something which is feasible in terms of economics and level of the subsidy being paid by the state for public transport system. In the suburban areas, more there will be on all the corridors the principle of having suburban trains every 30 minutes, and in the off-peak time, maybe, or let's say early morning and very late night hours, rather 60-minute service. And then what is important for the timetabling purposes in Riga area, having let's say a 15-minute interval, so that all stops in capital city are served with 15 minutes frequency. So it would give encouraging competitive advantage to use the train instead of the car as well for the city travel, so that as well the suburban public transport might be used for inner city mobility needs, of course in connection with the current public transport. Another aspect would be as well the combination of trains and train and bus services. Here I wanted to point out the lines we have here in this picture, in this sketch. We already discovered that in many cases by increasing a little bit, let's say, speeds and increasing the operational speeds for the trains without big intervention into the railway infrastructure, by changing the trains from the old ones to the new ones and more sustainable, more zero-emission trains, there is a considerable potential for let's say faster travel times from region to the capital city and vice versa, and between the regional cities. And this means that even today, if we look for some smaller towns or villages, then the combination of travel, for example, here in north from Staicele, Masloca or Ruiena to Riga with one interchange in Valmiera, if properly managed with proper interchange times, we can even gain in nowadays some 10 to 15 minutes compared to the current bus schedule, and as well have much more reliable traffic as around Riga region. There are many traffic jams which are of course influencing bus traffic but not influencing the train traffic. And in some directions, like for example here in very far northeast, we could reduce with one interchange as well the travel times even by 30 or 40, even 40 minutes, as here the bus travel times are quite long, and the buses have to have longer stops due to the driver times and rest times needs. So that again here through intermodality may help a lot. So this was my story on how we are working beyond Rail Baltica, how we are integrating the different transport systems and creating much better perspective for our citizens in the future, and having long-term approach, and of course setting up small steps already, let's say in very near future, so that the user, the passenger, the citizen can get the benefit from the improving transportation system in the Baltics already today, tomorrow, and every subsequent year. And once the Rail Baltica will be in place, of course, better and more integrated transport system will welcome services on Rail Baltica, and thus have another important development, as we of course we expect that of course Rail Baltica will bring a lot of potential for existing public transport system to supply with the passengers Rail Baltica railway system and vice versa. And this will have a significant effect. So a good public transport system, which is created in a proper way, is essential enabler of good and well-functioning Rail Baltica. And the travel times which are presented on the Rail Baltica infrastructure are very competitive, and if we make as well the rest of the public transport system in the country competitive enough, so we can expect much more car drivers shifting from driving a car to public transport, notably railways. So this was, let's say, the story. Thank you. And now I will answer some of your questions. So Martinez is asking, hello, how the Rail Baltica traffic control centers are planned? Will they be integrated into already existing train control centers, or will be new centers? This is currently the topic under the discussion on the different formats in Rail Baltica family, and I wouldn't be the person who could answer very precisely on the status on how these control centers, what is the concept for now, but anyhow, we have here the principle of that traffic control has to be made so that neither from the railway undertaking's perspective nor from the passenger perspective there is some disturbance or some disadvantage of the systems, and that there might be, let's say, that there are on the table, on the discussion, many options for having just one single control center, or having 3 decentralized control centers, or even integrated in the existing railway centers. Every of these options has some pros and cons, and more likely that the system which will be decided will be somewhere in between these extremes I mentioned, as there is a lot of practicalities on how to decide. Anyhow, Rail Baltica from its functional perspective is just one railway system which is running across three countries, and this means that of course it makes difficult to arrange a proper control center concept. As well, the language has to be considered, and the true and I can just say as well, for the one person who asked the question about the communication language of train drivers and with train drivers, then this is what has been so far agreed, that the communication language will be English, as we cannot afford that there are 3 train drivers across country on the high-speed train, which is running for around, let's say, a bit more than 1 hour in each country. But of course, there is an issue if the communication shall be with the rescue services and some other state services in each country. Of course, the national language is then the main for some emergency communication. So there is, of course, a lot of work to be done to establish proper processes, proper procedures, ultimately with the purpose that the railway traffic is safe and as well is easy to operate. Yeah, then the last question I would like to answer: how the operator will be selected for the subsidized passenger services. So, first of all, there is, let's say, quite an easy answer. There should be a competition, and this competition is already defined by EU law and as well by the public procurement law. So, in case of Latvia, how we see this issue is that. First of all, we have to make, of course, some mandatory studies to determine what is the market, what is the interest of the railway undertakings. This is on the agenda in upcoming years, and only then to decide on how to procure the services. Another dimension for these subsidized passenger services, or let's say PSO obligation, is of course as well the issue of the rolling stock. This is as well yet to decide on how the rolling stock provision will be organized. On the table there are several options on how to do, and let's say these options are of course then numerous in terms of shall it be done on national or let's say on Baltic level, shall it be done let's say by public transport authorities or similar entities creating some rolling stock company, or can it be led to the market alone? So there are multiple options still on the agenda, but one that I would like to stress is that of course there shall be a competitive award for these public services, so that as well the state and the passengers get then the best offer, best proposal for the mobility services on Rail Baltica regional service network. So this was, I think, then all about the questions we had. Thank you for the attention, and I hope you to meet in Rail Baltica trains, and before Rail Baltica starts operation, let's use more public transport system. Let's encourage our families to shift from car transport to public transport, and thus making our lives more sustainable. Thank you for attention. Bye-bye.